The Marvel Disney Plus series have looked absolutely visually stunning, way better than what their contemporaries have been putting out.
Damn it, it's not right.
I mean, with a reported budget of $225 million on WandaVision, they absolutely spared no expense. Due to the runtime of the series, there's actually more CGI effects in these shows than the entirety of Endgame. So let's take a look at just how some of the most satisfying shots and effects were created in the series that have aired thus far. Loki introduced a whole slew of breakout characters, proving that even after the colossal collaboration of Endgame, the Marvel Cinematic Universe still has plenty of interesting characters up its sleeve.
I love your shoes, I love your hair. Oh man, nice nose, thanks man.
I mean, come on, a freaking alligator stole the show. The design of Miss Minutes, the Mr. DNA-inspired mascot for the TVA, took the creative team quite some time to design and produce. The character herself began simply with the 2D, hand-drawn animation we saw in the TVA training videos, being akin to classic Hanna-Barbera cartoons. But in an effort to fit the character into the retro-futuristic aesthetic of her workplace, Miss Minutes had to be a hologram. This combination of two-dimensional styled character brought into the third dimension took quite a while to get just right. But we could all agree that the design is glorious. The MCU has had many interesting stand-ins to give their performers correct eye lines. Miss Minutes was a tube with some lights wrapped around it to give some reference lighting to the post team. Alligator Loki, on the other hand, oh, he was a dinky toy. You know what? I'd spend a good chunk of change for this little guy's a plush. So, the idea of having some scenes in black and white is, well, black and white. You hit the preset in After Effects and voila! Well, of course, things aren't that simple. For the first 2 episodes of WandaVision, where the episodes took place in the 50s and 60s eras of sitcom television, the production team had to work in a collaborated waltz to ensure that their designs would truly pop in the shades of black and white. For example, with the radish tone of Vision's skin, or I guess vibranium rather. In the development phase, the team put the black and white effect on Vision from previous films, and it didn't translate too well. The workaround for this was introducing the 4th official member of the Blue Man Group, Blue Man Vision.
I'm afraid I just blew myself.
Vision was definitely not the only creative workaround that the crew had to worry about. Everything on set had to be designed around the idea that the footage would be heavily manipulated. The lighting would hit differently, the textures on certain costumes might pop more or less, and of course, the color of the sets would also have to be primarily blue. So, as it turns out, even though Disney has Spider-Man flying through the sky throughout the day at the Avengers campus, they can't actually give their performers the power of flight. Well, kind of. We'll get into that in a minute. Between the 3 series that have been put out on Disney Plus so far, there is absolutely no shortage of wire work. We've got the high-flying battles between the Scarlet Witch and Agatha, Captain America soaring through the skies like a patriotic eagle, and Loki absolutely wrecking everyone in his path. The effect is done exactly as you would expect. In fact, WandaVision had the fun Deus Ex Machina gag in the 2nd episode, which pulled back the curtain on how this effect has been done since the early days of Greek theater. Of course, with thousands of years of technical development, the trick has evolved, featuring all sorts of moving parts to make the flight more visceral. Add in some massive fans, a little bit of rotoscoping, and some CGI touch-up, and you have 2 witches absolutely defying gravity. As I alluded to before, there is some real flight going on at Marvel Studios. As I'm talking about CGI and how fake things are digitally etched into reality, I have to give a massive shout out to all the stunt departments working on every show for putting their bodies through the dark dimension and back. Falcon and the Winter Soldier contains one of the craziest stunts. Remember that opening action scene where Batroc and his boys were wingsuiting through the rocky ravines? Well, the LAF goons were all actually wingsuit aficionados flying around in real time. Anthony Mackie, on the other hand? No way insurance would let that iconic smirk ever get damaged. That was a combination of wire work on a blue screen and superimposing Mackie's face on a 3D model to sell the close-ups. We've been seeing a lot of chroma keyed footage so far, so as we entered the cyberpunk-like neon-lit streets of Sharu on Lamentis 1, it wouldn't be too far off to believe that the city was all an elaborate construct. no realer than the Asgard that classic Loki conjured up. Well, as it turns out, it was actually a physical set. Ta-da! And quite the impressive one at that. The stakes for the scene were massive, as it was quite literally the end of the world. A one-take style chase sequence of Loki and Sylvie trying to board the Ark in a disaster movie-esque apocalypse was no easy feat, and a set was required to sell the scramble of it all. The design is incredible and even ties into the Jack Kirby style designs of Thor Ragnarok. That one-take chase that I mentioned, that was quite the doozy to film. It was inspired by Children of Men in that you are closely following the main characters as world-ending events are taking place. The scene actually used 9 shots with Birdman-esque cuts to stitch it all together. Each shot required about 2 weeks of filming. For what it's worth, this moment is one of my favorite set pieces in the entirety of the MCU, and I truly hope we get more moments like this in Season 2. Wanda's chaos magic manifested itself by creating the Hex, an under-the-dome-like barricade that separated the real world from Wanda's sitcom-inspired sandbox. Like the design work behind the black and white scenes from earlier on in the series, this design was also very well thought out. Since Westview was acting like a television series, the glitches surrounding the Hex happens to be the exact same glitches one would find on their dinky television screen. Scan lines, dead pixels, and magnetization are among the many glitches that make up the Hex. Glitches that only become more apparent as Monica breaches the Hex and receives her powers. When we were talking about Miss Minutes, I briefly brought up the term retro-futuristic, a timeless clashing of designs that form an otherworldly aesthetic. It's because of this out-of-time design that the Time Variance Authority required all sorts of practical and computer-generated imagery to come to life. Rooms like Judge Renslayer's office are obviously sets.
I really feel like I've bonded with the space.
But other locations, like this wide shot of the elevators, seems too crazy to be real. Yet this place, it actually exists. It's the Atlanta Marriott's Marquis, which itself features an extremely dystopian design to its lobby. Then there's the Metropolis-inspired expanse that exists outside of the TVA offices that were blue-screened and generated after the fact to create the sci-fi setting. It's like Walt Disney's original plans for Epcot, and I absolutely love it in all its chaotic glory. In the second episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as the titular heroes are fighting the Flag Smashers for the vaccines, an insane amount of work went into planning and filming the 4-minute sequence. Planning took over 8 months and started exactly how a group of kids would plan it out, with little toy cars. As production drew closer, live-action pre-visualization was completed before the stars of the show filmed on top of small platforms to get the face shots and one-liners one would expect from a Marvel project.
Hello, girl, kick your ass.
Whereas the stunt performers filmed on top of 2 full-size cargo containers. The team originally wanted to use real footage of trucks driving in Atlanta to superimpose the action on top of, but unfortunately the footage just didn't pass as Germany, which meant they had to create the entire background in post. The most impressive shot of this entire sequence has to be John Walker falling off of the truck. The stunt double fell off the truck in Atlanta, whereas Wyatt Russell filmed his recovery from the fall in Prague, and then all the footage was manipulated to seem like one seamless shot in Germany. Ah man, I just love behind the scenes magic. Looking into what's next, we have What If. The cel-shaded animation is being handled by Flying Bark Productions. Their past works include Maya the Bee and Lego's least known show, The Monkey Kid. Their track record might not be fantastic, but I am really excited to see Marvel Studios' first foray into animation.